Actually, if you're a true Bitcoiner, you should spend your Bitcoin. Ultimately, yes, you should maximize your stack. But I think by focusing solely on, okay, don't spend as much as you earn, that's enough. But you should also be in a position where you should actually reinvest this Bitcoin into your time while you're here. Basically transitioned my skills, what I did in the music industry, into the Bitcoin industry. The one thing which is so exciting about Bitcoin is that we're building this parallel system or a parallel economy, which needs all the skills that the normal fiat industries or the normal economies have. Kind of from a filmmaker's perspective, it's really a dream, but you have to sell your soul because you need to create all of those videos promoting the new airdrop of Shitcoin X. But they have so much money. It's actually ridiculous. If you consume with the intention to create something yourself, like that's the right thing to do.
To give people a little bit of a background who you are, maybe give us some overview of what you're doing and what is in Bitcoin that excites you most.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so my name's Max. I'm basically a filmmaker, and I started my Bitcoin journey actually in the music industry. So I've been working in the music industry, creating brands and artists there. And then at some point I stumbled upon this weird thing, Bitcoin, which since then I can't get enough of, and basically transitioned my skills, what I did in the music industry, into the Bitcoin industry. So why do I say this? Because this is also the thing that excites me most about Bitcoin. So I want to tie this into my personal journey, because the one thing which is so exciting about Bitcoin is that we're building this parallel system or a parallel economy, which needs all the skills that the normal fiat industries or the normal economies have. And I was basically at the point when I found Bitcoin, I was as I said, in the music industry. I had no idea how this skill set, which I had, could translate to the Bitcoin industry. So I basically just tried to adapt this and build now a business. I co-founded 21C Studios, and we are behind a lot of Bitcoin brands. So we help them making videos, documentaries. We edit a bunch of podcasts. So it's definitely a thing which I want to tell anybody who's listening there, that like the one thing is we all need new Bitcoiners and Bitcoin needs new skills. So yeah, that's very shortly who I am and what I think is the most important thing about Bitcoin.
Yeah, I think we need, it's such a great point, because I think we need a lot more Bitcoiners and a lot more people that create content, write more books, more articles, make more podcasts, make more TikToks, like movies, documentaries. Like there's so many different forms of content these days, but like from all of them, we need like 20x more.
Exactly. And that's also the cool thing, because like Bitcoin touches every single aspect of your life, which I kind of hinted at before. But like, it doesn't necessarily mean that if you are like a new Bitcoin podcaster, that you won't talk about the same thing, but there will be a niche. For example, somebody's going to talk about business and Bitcoin, and another person's going to talk about health and Bitcoin. And I think that's just a natural progression. And because Bitcoin is still this one thing and this one topic, a lot of people probably are like, oh, there are enough Bitcoin podcasts, there are enough Bitcoin filmmakers. But if you reframe that and just see it as something which touches every aspect of your life instead of just being this one topic, you can actually just choose another topic in the intersection together with Bitcoin. And there you have a niche where you can build your own brand, you can create something if this is something you want to do.
Yeah, that's probably one rule that I broke, because I have like literally everyone in the Bitcoin industry. Like I've now, like, you're my 418th guest. So like I didn't really pick a niche in Bitcoin, which has there are some problems with that. Like especially with event organizers, they always like, oh, like, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, I don't know, Bitcoin. Like I always talk about Bitcoin and everything that is kind of related to that, and even like parenting and diet and all those things that kind of Bitcoiners also like to talk about. But that's really interesting, and I think we need that like social proof and the social revolution of Bitcoin more and more. I think it's really important that people stand up and talk about Bitcoin, so we don't lose to the altcoin, shitcoin show that they
Yeah,
are doing.
exactly. And it's also this thing right now, like as you said, like it's almost like a I don't want to frame it as a fight against the altcoins, but apparently they they have a lot of VC money, have a lot of marketing thing, and Bitcoin doesn't have that. Bitcoin basically just has the people who believe in it, and I think therefore like everybody has this unique perspective on Bitcoin because it is so diverse and so yeah, like you can talk about Bitcoin in so many different angles. So I really think because we have this now also with lobbying, what happened just with Trump on Sunday when he announced the strategic shitcoin reserve. It's just like everybody can to a certain degree help push the Bitcoin message. And if it's, posting a meme, posting some tweets, or even just doing a podcast, which is only about Bitcoin, like you did already 418 episodes or whatever it was. And there is an audience for everything with Bitcoin. And if we think about that Bitcoin will only grow, also Bitcoiners will grow. And therefore, I think it's a great point in history where there are so many opportunities, but you just have to take one of them and actually commit to it and have the discipline to, keep pushing forward. And so that's why I would say, like, if you're a Bitcoiner, start doing content. We need you.
Absolutely. You touch on a really interesting point of because Bitcoiners tend to get wealthy over time as it's the most sound money and it's the best form of storing your financial energy. And you also get this minimal approach of like DCAing of like, don't spend more than you make. And like you're incentivized to do all those great financial things. If we spin that like 50 years in the future, it will be a world where those people who actually did the Bitcoin way, the Bitcoin DCAing, the Bitcoin storing financial things, those will be the people with all the resources that can influence politics, that can influence all the other things. Probably like politicians will be Bitcoiners because they will be the ones that can fund themselves. How different is that the game theory of what we are currently playing, that in the end we will win with that, but like in the middle part it's hard because it's like a decentralized movement and we don't have a CEO or a marketing team and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think this is exactly the point which makes us stronger to a certain degree, because you need to hold to your values with a lot of integrity and not sell yourself out. And there, like Bitcoin history has shown, bunch of people who were not able to do that. And I think, as you said, because Bitcoin gives people this wealth and ultimately the power, with this power, there comes a lot of responsibility. And I think because it goes that way, which you just said, that it's apparently very hard to do that right now. I think this is just, you could almost say it's a filter for the people who are earning then in the future to get this responsibility, because everybody who wants to trade shitcoins, because you can make $1 million as a content creator probably if you shill some shitcoin and so on, but I think it's this short time preference thinking which ultimately in the long run will destroy you, because first of all, like you would need to abandoning all of your morals and your values, but also, as you said, I think the long-term game of having or building this Bitcoin as network is invaluable. It's almost like being in Silicon Valley in the early days, and then knowing all of the people in there, the podcasters, even just the plebs, is like still so small. If you go to like several Bitcoin conferences, you will always meet the same people. And I do think because the people who tend to stay in the space for that long have the right values, in the future they will be represented in those in those jobs or positions which have a lot of responsibility, and therefore I think it will pay off later massively, whereas now it might seem like the harder way.
It's a low time preference way of life. Do you have insights of like you're doing documentaries, movies, like podcast edits, and all those things for Bitcoiners? Do you also have insights in in the altcoin world with the same exact thing? And can you compare those things, like you said in the beginning, with VC money and stuff like that?
Yeah, so me personally, I don't really have experience because I don't really want to work with those guys. But I have some friends in the filmmaking space which started working for like shitcoin exchanges, and it's insane how much money they pay. It's like, it's kind of, from a filmmaker's perspective, it's really a dream, but you have to sell your soul because you need to create all of those videos. Um, yeah, promoting the new airdrop of shitcoin X, and but they have so much money, it's actually ridiculous. And so this is kind of the thing where I've been experimenting a lot with value for value the last couple of years, where I was like trying to, yeah, test if the Bitcoin people are actually sending you money if you do high quality content, and it worked to a certain degree. But I was really questioning what I just told you before you asked this question, which was that it will count in the long term. And just now, the last couple of months, now I see how it's actually paying off, because it's been like, for me, creating content has been very hard, like not profitable at all. But I did it now for, I think, 3 years, and only now with staying in this space, it's actually, now the need is there for people to have those high quality edits. And now it's like, I would say those years is building a, how do I best say that? It's not monetary value, but it's like a people value. That's not the right way to say it, but it's like the the people network is so much more worth now, that any money which I would have been able to acquire by working for shitcoins, because now, people are working on bigger projects. They are actually connected to my values, and I see that, like, now I can spread my message in a way that I would want to. But having said that, yes, shitcoiners pay a shit ton of money, and it's like you have to be very strong to not start working with those.
Yeah, it also makes you kind of question like where this money comes from, and obviously we know a lot of people lose a lot of money playing in the shitcoin world, and in the end of the day, someone has to pay for those things, and it's usually the the end user that uses these air tokens, those tokens that fly around, and plays those kind of crypto games, I would call it, and in the long run, I think the truth will win out. I'm
Yeah.
also really interesting of like you tried value for value. I never really tried value for value. I do have some very small part in value for value, but I don't promote it, so it's small. With you being long in there, what have you seen of like monetizing content? I mean, it also depends on like what kind of content you have, but you probably try like sponsorships, partnerships, value for value, and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, so value for value works to a certain degree, but it only works when it's really high quality content. So I created the Nostr documentary, which was like the first documentary about Nostr, which is a protocol um, on which you can't be censored. And so there, I would say it worked pretty good, just because I put a lot of effort in there, and it was like this whole thing where a lot of people actually knew how long it took me and saw like the process of me doing it. Whereas other videos really don't work at all, even though I put a lot of work in. So it's like I didn't yet figure out what the thing is that makes value for value work, um, because, and that's kind of like where I'm now thinking the value for value approach is not on the monetary side, but it's rather on the other side, on the network side, because like for those 3 years, a lot of people knew me and kind of knew that, okay, I'm doing this with value for value. I don't do anything else, and that helped me to get to know people which I wouldn't have been able to know, because it was like, oh, you have to work together with this guy. He's doing this. Let me introduce you to this guy. And so even though I can't really answer the question what works with value for value, where I would tend to say yes, it works with very high quality videos, which people actually care. Is yeah, it's kind of like, yeah, I would repeat what I said, but one thing which I wanted to add here as well is that as a content creator, value for value is, it seems shitty, but it's actually a very honest feedback mechanism, because clicks and likes and all of that, this is cheap. Like, it doesn't have any cost for the viewer to actually do this. Yes, you might argue that the attention that you have to put onto watching it, but then this this aspect of actually sending somebody money, this is where the true value lies. And by being on those 3 years of creating content via value for value, I think that this helped me to become a better filmmaker or content creator, because I was seeing what the people actually care about. And this led me then down the path of I've been like all over the place doing Bitcoin content, Nostr content, health content. And somehow for me, for example, the health content really worked good and people liked it and zapped it and sent me some Bitcoin. And then I figured out, oh yeah, I actually enjoy doing this a lot. And now I'm actually focusing even more on that angle of Bitcoin. So it's kind of this feedback mechanism which can be very, very valuable of your skills, of the network you will acquire, but it might lack in the value of the monetary representation of the work you put in.
Yeah, there's this like hierarchy of feedback. The cheapest ones are obviously like likes or anything that goes with one click. And then I guess the second level, or the second highest level, would be the average view duration, the actual time that people spend onto something, like a like on a tweet that didn't cost anything. Like, it's literally a second that they spend on a tweet. But if they invested, let's say, 1.5 hours on a podcast, like, that's kind of a feedback of like, oh, he sticked around for 1.5 hours. There's some kind of time investment in. And then the next thing would be, yeah, like they did not only watch it, they also like gave money, because if they gave money, they probably have watched it.
Yes, exactly.
So like the first level kind of requires the second one. So there's like this like, it's fascinating, because I personally don't say like, oh, like give me value for value or anything like that. I don't advertise it, but still I get value for value here and there. Mm-hmm. I think it's almost every week actually from somewhere, even if you don't count Fountain, because if Fountain, I think it's almost every day now, where there's some boost or something like that coming. But I'm amazed of how generous people are and saying like, hey, I found value in that free podcast that I don't have to give anything, but I like to give more, because I found value in that. I'm amazed by that kind of mindset. Do you think that's a Bitcoin thing, or just a human value for value? Is that new movement coming up?
I mean, you could argue that value for value was always there. And if you go to any street in a major city, you have some artists or musicians playing there. And that's kind of the same thing, where a musician just stands there and hopes that you give him money. And ideally, if he's very good, the value he gets back, of course, is higher as well. And I think value for value is just and by the way, this was how before concerts and so on happening, like in the Middle Ages, how the music industry worked, because they were just playing like this, or had like even theaters, and it was free for you to watch, and then you were able to donate whatever you thought it's worth. So I don't think that it's a new thing. I think it's just the adaptation of that into the internet and like the cyberspace. And this is then combined with the understanding of Bitcoiners that what is actually valuable, and also valuing this value and then being generous enough to give it back. So I don't think that in another space people would be as not genuine, as, how to say, free to give something. It's just because people who are into Bitcoin, I think, have a very special perception of value and what it means to get there, because they're so connected with proof of work. They understand it. and the combination of those two actually make value for value kind of work, but also it's still so early. So I hope that like in 5 to 10 years it's going to be working even better, because then it's just normal to play to do that. But yeah.
It's, I never looked at that value for value is kind of what the before the digital age, just standing on the street and performing with a guitar is. That's what you're kind of doing. You're performing on digital streets, and you're hoping that someone puts a euro in your in your basket. But now it's not a digital. Now it's not a like a physical cash euro. Now it's like a Satoshi that people can put in your basket,
And the
which is a fun thing.
yeah, the interesting thing about this is that basic value for value lives mostly about the discrepancy, or like the difference of people's net worth. So even with being on the street, people there might be walking a millionaire by or something and give you $50, you know, and that's a lot for you. The normal people might send you 2 cents, 10 cents, or whatever. But now it's kind of like in the physical space, this is super limited, um, because you only see the people who are actually walking by. But on the internet, this is finally scalable, and this is why I'm so like bullish for it. Maybe in 5 to 10 years, if like more people own Bitcoin, more platforms or protocols actually enable it. Because for me, for example, Michael Saylor once sent me Bitcoin because of one of my videos, you know. And of course, for Michael Saylor, sending Bitcoin is on a complete different level than for a normal pleb. And therefore, this one video then was suddenly profitable just because one person enjoyed it.
It's amazing. What did he? What was the video about?
It was the silent Bitcoin revolution of Africa. It was basically me traveling South Africa. It's already like 3 years ago or something. It was one of my first documentaries I ever worked on, and it was basically just explaining how African people are using Bitcoin and what use cases, yeah, they are catering there.
Interesting. What is actually your favorite project that you did so far? I saw like the Africa that you mentioned, Nostr you mentioned. I think El Salvador you also you did one. What is kind of like something that stands out for you?
Yeah. For me, definitely one of my latest ones, my Mutai documentary, was basically me, because it was just not only the editing work, which the other one was, but it was actually just me being out of my comfort zone and getting fucked for 6 months, because I basically started from zero knowledge. I've never been a fighter, never had any fighting or boxing lessons, to getting into the ring of a professional Muay Thai fight and fighting a Thai. And so it was kind of like just, this was like the most proof of work I've done in any project I've ever, or like in my life, because it just took so long to actually build up the skill, then also edit the video that it's good, and then yeah, post it. But that's definitely the one which I'm most proud of.
I love that. It's recently I had Renato Moicano and Kenny Florian also on my podcast, and there will maybe 1, 2 more UFC fighters actually be on my channel. I'm fascinated by, by the intersection of fighting and Bitcoin. How was I unfortunately did not see the video, but how was the experience? Like 6 months you're trying to fight, and then after the 6 months you had like one big fight. So you trained for 6 months and you had one fight.
Yeah, it was very hard, very, very hard. And it's like, it's so humbling to do that, because yeah, it's like you can't cheat in fighting. There's no cheating there. Like in a lot of things in life, you can cheat your way through, you can kind of wing it, but not in fighting, because it's so undeniably raw that if you like, if you have your, like, even just your arms down for 1 second, it could be over. So it's really this primal, like this primal way of, yeah, almost like, I wouldn't even call it a sport, because one pro Muay Thai fight I was training with was like always saying you can't play Muay Thai or fighting, because you play football, you play tennis, and you play all of that stuff, but there's nothing which is playful about fighting, because it's very, very dangerous. So they only like you can only fight Muay Thai, you can't play Muay Thai. And so the 6 months for me kind of were this realization, going through this and going through a lot of pain, which I never experienced before. But I think also doing this was extremely valuable for like my life. I don't think that I'm gonna fight again because I had all of the learnings which I had in the first fight. But if I would have never fought yet, I would urge everybody to do it once, because it's something which you can't really tell anybody, because the 2 weeks before the fight, so I've been training for 5 months, 5.5 months, and then the 2 weeks before, like, I knew the fight was scheduled and there was no going back. And then suddenly you face this. It's literally it's a fear of death, because you don't know what's going to happen there. So the professional Muay Thai fights are only with gloves, but no paddings, nothing. And you can kick, you can give somebody an elbow. And then the 2 weeks before that, I was kind of realizing, oh shit, what if something happens? You know, that happens a lot, that people break their noses, people even dying in there because they break their necks or something. And so confronting this fear of death willingly changes you, because you need to you think suddenly so differently about life. So for me, for one moment for me was, I was walking through, I was in Thailand, so I was walking through Thailand, and it was only a couple of days before my fight, and everybody was so happy, and everybody was like having fun here and there, all the tourists, and I had this realization that, like, dude, nobody here, they're all living such a good life, but they don't know how dangerous life could be. And I was like, oh shit, like, what when something happens, da, 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 da. And it was just like, all of those people are kind of like living their life, but have no idea what I'm about to do, and I have no idea what they're about to do. And so from there, at some point, a couple of days before the fight happened, I kind of had this acceptance of death, that, like, even if I die in there, it was my decision. I went this journey, and this was very powerful, because then it kind of switched, and you just accept it, and you're very calm. It's like you don't have any fear, nothing. And also, when I then got into the ring, it was it was a weird feeling, because I was super prepared, I was super dialed in, I was very nervous, but not really afraid of death. And that's something which I don't think you can understand unless you went through something like that.
Interesting. It did you call your family before the fighters? Is like, if you have that realization, like, oh, I could die in there, is there something like, oh, like, maybe I should make a round and call my like my 5 loved ones?
I didn't call them because I didn't want them to be worried, but I had I wrote something down for just in case. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that has to be such an interesting experience of like, hey, because I might die tomorrow, I'll write a letter down and write down what's most important for me to give other people.
Yeah.
I think just going through that experience alone is probably worth it, right?
Exactly. And it's also like, after this, your values also change radically. Whereas, like, things which you thought are important for you might look very different after you realize this. Like, oh, what if I would die tomorrow? Like, what is actually the thing that truly matters? And this kind of happened. And I think that's why also a lot of people say this, like, fighting is spiritually, is because of that reason. It's not necessarily just the 15 minutes in the cage or in the ring, but it's especially the preparation, as well as this short period before the fight. Because it's also, I also had Kenny Florian on my podcast, and he also said, like, you're getting used to the fear, but it never really goes away. It's just like, how do you actually, you just learn how to cope with the fear, but it never goes away. So, um, yeah, I forgot where I wanted to go with this, but yeah, with the writing down, exactly. And that's why, like the whole thing of actually fighting, we could also go why the fight itself is spiritual, but I would say even this period before the preparation will change your life massively, because it just puts everything into perspective, which I think is very important. Because, like, as I said, the people in Thailand, when I was walking there, I was just like, dude, like life on this earth is actually not always happy chappy. Like if you look at the history of mankind, there were always war, there were always death, diseases, and so on. And we're now having this perception that, okay, maybe not even now in the last 2 years, but I think a lot of people forget that nature is kind of brutal, which is just part of it. It's not, don't say it's good or bad, it's just part of what nature is. And this kind of just gives you such a deep insight into this brutality. And I think that's one of the most valuable things, to be connected to that brutality. And yeah, I learned a lot from it.
It's also like you probably got there's this thing like time is way more valuable than even Bitcoin. So like that's the only thing also way more scarce than Bitcoin. And you probably also got a lot of calmness in that of like, okay, I can lose Bitcoin, I can spend Bitcoin, because the most valuable thing is actually the time, and not having a huge stack of Bitcoin.
And that's also a thing which I'm thinking a lot of, because a lot of Bitcoiners are like, oh, don't spend your Bitcoin, don't spend your Bitcoin. But I'm also thinking, like, actually, if you're a true Bitcoiner, you should spend your Bitcoin, because it's ultimately, yes, you should maximize your stack. But I think by focusing solely on, okay, don't spend as much as you earn, that's enough. But you should also be in a position where you should actually reinvest this Bitcoin into your time while you're here. And what do I mean by that? Like, you should probably invest your stack into building a family, having experiences which you can't exchange. But just sitting on your stack, you're not using it for anything, is, in my opinion, also not the smartest way of handling Bitcoin. Because yeah, ultimately life is here, I think, to learn and have experiences, and those will then propel you on the next level or wherever you want to go. And it ties also back to what we said before with like getting responsibility once Bitcoin is there. If you're just sitting on your stack, not doing anything, not spending it to meet other people, not spending it to go full on risk on something else, I think it's harder for you to have enough experiences to land at the end of Bitcoin hyper Bitcoinization, where you're in a position where you learned enough during that period of time where you can actually take responsibility for your lives, but also for others' lives.
Yeah, this is a really good point of like, Bitcoin is money, and money should be used. Yes. Like it's a tool.
Exactly. Yeah. And like, I understand the people who say like, don't spend your Bitcoin, but I don't agree with them. And I say like the caveat here is like, you shouldn't spend more Bitcoin than you make in a month. Like, your Bitcoin or sats balance should always be positive. And it's enough if it's 1 sat or 10 sats, as long as your monthly balance goes up in Satoshi's term. Don't look at the dollar term, but just look at the Satoshis. Then you're living onwards towards the right direction. And that's ultimately the only thing you need to focus on.
Let's take a break for a moment and appreciate the beauty that Coin Vigilante has made with the Bitcoin watches. Those watches are the most amazing, the most elegant way of showing that you are a true Bitcoiner. And Coin Vigilante just dropped a completely new and amazing Genesis edition of their watch collections. You have the date of the first ever mined Bitcoin block in there, and of course also the block height and which epoch we are currently in. I love the level of detail they put in this masterpiece. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. And now, if you have Bitcoin, I really do hope that you don't have it on exchange. But if you do have it on exchange, I have 2 ways for you to deal with that. that. The first way is you put it on a hardware wallet. That's the entry for you to get into the self-custody game. I recommend BitBox, Bitcoin only edition for that. It's a super simple and secure way. And if you check out the link in the description, you even get 5% off if you use the code Robin. And the second way is the Bitcoin way. The Bitcoin way is your all-in partner in terms of how to get the most out of your sovereignty. They will personalize for you a self-custody setup that is perfect for your individual situation. They will show you how you can secure your own devices. Securing your Bitcoin is not enough. You also have to keep all your devices secure. One topic that is overlooked often is the inheritance plan. What happens with your Bitcoin once you are no longer here? Do you have a plan for that in place already? And last but not least, if you're in the jurisdictions where you don't feel safe, it's better to get a plan B. For all that, head over to thebitcoinway.com/Robin to get a 30-minute free call. And just a quick side note, I will be for the first time ever speaking at the Bitcoin Prague event in June. It will be absolutely legendary and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of you there. You can get your ticket in the link down in the description of Bitcoin Prague, and very important, use code Robin to get 10% off your ticket. I'm really looking forward seeing you there. But even beyond that, I think I've lived my whole life like that. Like since I'm 21 years old, so like the last 4 or 5 years, I've been always stacking Bitcoin. Like each month I had more satoshis than the previous month, with 1-2 small exceptions where I lost Bitcoin because of small mistakes, but let's not go into that too deep. But outside of those exceptions, but I think if there's really something valuable, it's okay to even spend Bitcoin savings that you already have, of okay, maybe, I don't know, I want to take, I've accumulated a big stack over the last 5 years. Maybe I want to take 1 year off with my family, or I think there's a responsible way of using your Bitcoin, to giving you more time and life back. And I think that's really valuable, even though I do agree a lot with if your Satoshi balance goes up every month, you're doing something right. And I think there's accumulation phases and maybe later down the line, you can spend more. But I think especially if you realize it could, even if you don't fight tomorrow, your life could still end tomorrow. And then you're okay, maybe I can still use that stack. It's something that I'm thinking of. Currently, I don't even have something I want to spend my Bitcoin on. So it's not even a debate that I have. So what's
your take then? Let's say, because one thing I also kind of, I'm thinking a lot about is this Bitcoin. Once you have this wealth, or Bitcoin just goes up, there is this tendency of people, as you say, to not work anymore, or to actually just chill because they have accumulated enough. And I think there's also a little bit of a problem with that. And I'm interested about your take on that, because my perspective is this, that I see you should provide value to other people and to society to build this future we all want to live in. Because as Bitcoiners, or me at least as a Bitcoiner, I want to live in this more prosperous, more efficient, or better future to a certain degree. And my way of helping to get there is to create value for other people. And the way to, the ultimate metric to see if this happens or not is my income or the money that comes in. So my question here is, what do you think about that? Because do you see the problem that when Bitcoin makes you too wealthy, or you're actually accumulating too much, that you then stop creating that value for other people?
I actually think everyone that, I don't know, if there's a Bitcoin OG now listening, and he has 100 Bitcoin, and he probably is making the calculation, is okay, I can probably retire now, especially if Bitcoin grows over time. I think you should not do it, but you should do it. And I explain by what I mean by that. You should retire that to get it out of the system. There are so many examples of successful entrepreneurs that were successful one time. They got a bunch of money and then they're like, okay, now I can retire. And they tried this life for 1 year and they got depressed. They got sad. Because all of a sudden there was nothing. Like being retired and don't doing anything, it sucks after a while. And I cannot I cannot speak about that, but because I never tried it. But this is what I hear all the time of people. They cannot stop. They want to do something. So I think if there's someone now that thinks of like, okay, should I retire on Bitcoin? Yeah, if you can afford it, like go ahead and do it, get it out of your system. I promise most of them after 6 months, 1 year, 5 years, whatever the time frame is, they will find something where like, oh, like that's really interesting. And all of a sudden, like, hey, maybe he can help. And all of a sudden they're building the next startup, they're building a new project or they're creating something. And that's really the empowerment that Bitcoin kind of gives. I was kind of doing that last year, actually, almost exactly 1 year ago. Last year in March, I left my fiat job, and I had a YouTube channel with around 400 subscribers, and you know how much this pays, like almost nothing, like literally nothing. And but I really wanted to do this podcast thing, and I was like, okay, I will try it with 21 Bitcoin and see where it goes. I didn't have any securities. My only income stream that I had back then, I don't have right now. So I had to really fast search for something new. But I really wanted to do it, and I could do it because I had my Bitcoin stack. So I was prepared to live off my Bitcoin to fulfill my dream with working in Bitcoin. And luckily I never had to sell a single Satoshi of my savings, ever, but I wouldn't have made the jump without my Bitcoin stack. So that's my two ways of thinking of that. It's like, if you really want to retire and lay on the beach, like go ahead, get it out of your system. I promise you will be back sooner than you think. And the second thing, that I think it can provide financial safety to actually do what you really like. If there's someone that, I don't know, is like 40 years old and he worked all his life now and he made a nice stack, but he really doesn't like his job, maybe it's a good time to try something new out and retire of your fiat job, but find something where you can actually contribute to society. And so like retiring doesn't mean laying on the beach. Retiring can also mean like doing what you really like. Like my grandpa is still every day in his garage and making wooden things. Like they are so amazing. All of our family has those things. So, but he doesn't take money for that. Like he's retired. But he pursues something, and he could sell it on an online store for a lot of money, I guess. But so I don't know. That's my two frameworks of how I think of retiring. I think retiring on a beach is boring, and if you want to do it, do it. But I don't think anyone really wants to do it for a long time.
Yeah, and what you just pointed out there, I think this is kind of how we then are able to create this better society, because by saving on like real money, at some point you can focus on the things that you actually really care about, and this then will give you also another purpose to actually achieve what you want to do. So I think it was the Wright brothers who they had a bike shop, which they were repairing bikes and so on, but they had this passion of actually wanting to learn how to fly. And because they had like the savings, which are stored in gold back then, they were able at some point to also make the jump to actually not focus as much on actually repairing bikes anymore, but focusing on like trying to see if they can figure out how to build a plane. And I think that's, for example, similar to what you said, happened to me as well. I wasn't a filmmaker a couple of years ago. Bitcoin actually gave me the possibility to become a filmmaker, in the sense that before that I was in the music industry. I didn't know that I want to do movies, or either that I can do it. And by getting into the Bitcoin industries or like industry, getting to know people, but then also making this jump of being like, okay, I don't want to have a fiat future. I want to do something within Bitcoin. Then I was able to, as you said, like actually go find my passion and then make something out of it. And sometimes it takes this leap of faith, like saying, okay, I'm okay to pay 10% of my stack for the next year or something. But yeah, I think you nailed it down there, because like not working, I think it makes you miserable, and Bitcoiners shouldn't aim to hold Bitcoin to retire. Bitcoiners should aim to use Bitcoin to actually free themselves from the fiat minds to work on what they truly care about.
Yeah, it's like the retiring on Bitcoin, and this whole topic of retiring within Bitcoin is super popular. And I think most people don't want to not do nothing. They want to do something they really like. I'm also curious. You said like you did the 6 months of my time. Are you always working like you're doing half a year or a year, like one project and nothing else in between? Did you, when you train for that fight, did you still work on other projects, or how do you do that?
Yeah, I mostly have different projects running simultaneously. So right now, I'm mainly focus on my own podcast, which I'm doing, as well as really focusing on the agency on 21C Studios. So right now, I don't have that many documentaries which I'm producing. But when I was doing the Muay Thai video, I actually, while training, I was filming the whole 6 months, but I also released every 3 weeks approximately, I would say, another documentary which I just made in the time frames between, which yeah is very hectic. But if you want to make YouTube work, it's harder than you think.
Yeah, I can agree to that. But that's really impressive. Of like within 3 weeks, the documentaries, because like I have the podcast, and it's great, and you probably know it from yours. It's so much more straightforward, the process. Like once I got my processes down, and now also in post production I've help. So it gets easier, because like the process is always very much the same. Just the conversation is different. But I imagine if you do a documentary, you have to fly there. Like there's so many other aspects to it that makes it harder. And I just sit on my ass every day on in the same studio.
Yeah, it's so hard, and that's ultimately why, like, I had trouble scaling it up, because it was so much time, as well as my documentaries were living from my cutting style and from my style which I did it. So I couldn't like even get help on the editing part of things. So yeah, that's why ultimately I founded 21C Studios, because I said, oh, there's like a huge problem here, like making those kind of stuff. There's nobody here, especially if you're in the Bitcoin space. So now I have a full team who are actually able to do that, which I wanted to do. But me personally, I like it more now, having this one process with having the podcast, knowing how to do the editing, and not needing to travel somewhere, meet people, and so on. Because I did it for 3 years, and it's a lot of work, and it's also yeah, it, I think I'm gonna start working on those things again, and I have one big documentary which I'm still working on, but for now I'm more focused on the podcast.
Absolutely, really cool. What kind of how do you look at the new world that Bitcoin creates? From what we just talked about in the last 20 minutes, of Bitcoin, people actually getting more freedom and more creativity and more of like, hey, I can actually do what I really enjoy, and maybe I find a market there, and replace my previous income, which I maybe was not that happy with. Like it seems like a radical shift in the whole system, which probably takes a long time, but it's really interesting to think about that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things that's gonna happen there. One thing which I think is that definitely there will be way more smaller companies or service providers, because it's just like anybody who wants to do that or has the ability now has also the freedom that if he works, let's say 5 years or something, he can actually stop working at the bigger company and just spin up his own version of whatever he's doing. And I think there's a massive benefit to that, because you can then create like those hyper focused agencies or services, which will provide the other people with even better value, where it's like not everything actually needs to be you going through one company, but you have all of the small companies, which have enough financing to actually do good work. Because one thing, especially when we look at creative things, they mostly work on a smaller scale. It's very hard to scale creativity. So I think because of this, we will have more artists who can live from what they're doing. We will have more creators. We will have more creative agencies, designers, and all of this. Whereas now, like most of the designing happening, I'm not too much in the fashion industry, but I'm just assuming that most of it is financed by the big companies, Zara, Louis Vuitton, and like there's not a lot of creative freedom anymore, which is like from the grassroots. And so I hope that this will enable this, that people just do their own stuff again, and it's not anywhere you go you have this big Zara, Louis Vuitton, and so on, but you have a small boutique. Maybe Robin is having his own t-shirt manufacturing thing, and I think it's gonna have like a very positive impact on first companies, but also people, families. I mean, you see it with Bitcoiners. All Bitcoiners who I know changed radically and to the better. So I'm just assuming that this will happen on all aspects of life.
I do. So yeah. It's interesting with like t-shirts, because like YouTube, as you probably know, gives the opportunity of like just placing things on, and I made those t-shirts, but it's definitely not my creative wonder that it's not something that I'm really passionate about, but it's definitely interesting of like what it empowers to do. One thing, you also made the documentary on El Salvador. What have you learned there from actual Bitcoin adoption? I think El Salvador is one of the regions where it's already really good developed. It's probably not as good as something especially as I saw last November when I was myself there. But what have you seen around El Salvador, and how do you think about the grassroots adoption there?
So I always like to contrast it to Costa Rica, where I've been as well in the Bitcoin jungle, and I would say there's a huge difference in both approaches. Whereas El Salvador, they're adopting Bitcoin from the top, but Costa Rica adopted it to a certain degree grassroots, because officially they didn't adopt anything there, right? But in Costa Rica, what happened there was like a community leader who was very much into Bitcoin, and they saw the issue that some farmers markets actually couldn't really use normal payment rails because it was too expensive for them. So they actually slowly but surely started orange pilling all of those people. And right now it's insane what's happening there. Like it's still smaller villages, but there are areas within Costa Rica where everybody understands Bitcoin. You don't need to understand what Lightning is. You don't. It's like everything works there. It's like truly Bitcoiners. They because they were so interested after using it in the farmers market. Most of them actually educated themselves. And so, whereas when I was in El Salvador, that wasn't really the case. I'm my hypothesis or theory is that because it's from the top down. So what happened there was, okay, the government said, okay, you need to accept Bitcoin from today to onwards. And a lot of people didn't know what that actually means and what the benefit was, because it was just like a governmental decree. And so I think because of this, also the adoption kind of stalled a little bit within El Salvador. I wouldn't say that it's bad or anything. For how many years was it now? I think 3 or maybe 4. I don't even remember. But for that, the amount of Bitcoin accepting businesses is decent, I would say. But the issue which I have with that is like they don't really care about it because it was this thing which was induced onto them. And in Costa Rica, I really see how people actively want to contribute, really help to get this Bitcoin ecosystem growing. So yeah, but also having said all of this, I think El Salvador is still like further than most countries and actually has like this huge Bitcoin adoption, which is great. But if I compare it to Costa Rica, I still have a couple of things which I would say we as Bitcoin community need to learn, that it's more important to showcase those people how their life could be better by using Bitcoin rather than just telling them, hey, use Bitcoin and it's going to be better. Because ultimately, a lot of people don't really care what it can do, but they care about how it can improve their lives. And I think we as Bitcoiners often forget focusing on the latter part, but focus on the first part, where it's like, oh my god, it has 21 million hard cap. Oh, the difficulty adjustment. But the normal people is like, yeah, I don't care about that. What does it actually improve for my life? And in Costa Rica, the people then saw, oh, I don't need to pay the 3%. That's actually a huge benefit for me. For other people, it's going to be, oh, I'm not penalized by 2% inflation every year. So that's, I think, a very long answer to what I've learned when I was in El Salvador, that we as Bitcoiners need to focus on how Bitcoin actually improves others' lives, because we often feel it. But I think by communicating this to other people, we're actually more like we will be able to better orange pill more people.
I also thought about that myself, of like maybe it would be more powerful if we focus on real world people's stories and tell those stories of like how Bitcoin improved their lives, and go away from making more content around, okay, like that's how Bitcoin works. That's why it will overtake the financial system. And then all those questions come up of like, oh, like, will the government not ban it? And all those things. But if you have a story of like, oh, like he adopted Bitcoin, then he did this, and that's how it really helped him do this small shop there. And I think those real world stories probably will work better with the general population, and it's probably a story that I can send better to my sister than like some 40-minute video where the properties of Bitcoin I explain and why it's the best money. And after 10 minutes, everyone clicked off and like, oh, like that's like the hardcore Bitcoiners love that. And it's the question of like, okay, if we create content for hardcore Bitcoiners, it's different for the general populations. Like the hardcore Bitcoiners love talking about monetary things, and then how Bitcoin will shake out in the next 10 years, and how the adoption is going, and how US dollar is failing and stuff like that. That's why, for example, a book like the new one from Larry Lepage is very popular. But I feel like there's a big need for real stories, just like, I don't know, like 10 great Bitcoiners in one book of how Bitcoin transformed their lives, and it's real world stories that are nicely written, even like documentary style movies around that. I think that's kind of probably that orange pills more people than, oh, we have a 21 million cap.
Exactly. And that's also what I tried, or still trying, with my content. Like I most of my content and documentaries especially, I never talk about technical stuff. It's always just showcasing, like, for example, the silent revolution of Africa. I just give them the minimal context to understand what Bitcoin is if you have no idea, but it's actually just showing how kids use it, why the kids use it. And there's like this one example which was very memorable, where one guy said the main reason why he uses Bitcoin is his parents, they were so poor that he's working and he always had his money in cash, but his parents, because he was so poor, actually stole his money from his from under his mattress. So that's why he now stores his wealth or his earnings in Bitcoin, because he's sure that his own parents won't be able to steal the money from him.
Amazing. That's a heck of a story.
Yeah.
It's like
Great.
to get your money safe from your own parents.
Yeah. But that's the reality, you know, that's like we as Westerners, you know, that's not even a use case I guess most people actually contribute or like think about when they talk about Bitcoin, because it's just like, oh yeah, we need a hard cap, inflation, da da da. It's like if you don't even are able to store $5 until the next day because your parents steal it, like you don't care about the hard cap, you don't care about the difficulty adjustment. And but this, I think, is the amazing thing about Bitcoin, that it's a solution for so many problems we have today. And that's how we started the podcast, right? There, Bitcoin has so many different angles. You can talk about it from so different things, but we all still don't really know what Bitcoin really is because it's so multifaceted. And therefore, the more people translate this phenomenon, which Bitcoin is, into different use cases, different applications, different languages, whatever you want to say, then we will get closer to the true potential of Bitcoin, to this true future, which it actually enables us to create. But we need those people to do that, because even this small, like, African boy, right? I would have never thought that this is a use case of Bitcoin, like not being stolen from your parents. And by going all together onto this path of trying to figure out what Bitcoin is, that's how we are actually actually having the potential to unlock what Bitcoin is, because I think nobody truly yet knows what Bitcoin will be able to achieve in the future.
Absolutely. You mentioned Nostr before. How does Nostr play into all those Bitcoin things now, as you also as yourself on social media outside of Nostr? How do you think Nostr will play into this Bitcoin world?
Yeah, Nostr is my favorite social media. Uh, yeah, I don't want to say application or platform because it's a protocol, but um, yeah, my favorite social media, which I'm using right now, because it has right now Bitcoin seemingly integrated. So what is Nostr? Nostr is a protocol on which you have your account and no one can shut it down. You can use it however you want it, on which app you want, but it's still one account. And within this account, there's like this native integration of Bitcoin. So you have like your wallet, you can use it instead of liking, you can send Bitcoin. And I think it it's a really powerful tool. Like we can talk about uh, Nostr individually and Bitcoin individually, but putting both of those together are actually a very interesting use case, because by putting them together, you create a day-to-day use case for Bitcoin, which finally enables true micropayments. Everybody always talked about, oh, we need micropayments, we need an application, or like we need a way to do that. That's what a lot of people early on in Bitcoin, yeah, were saying, that that's a bad thing about Bitcoin, that we can't have those micropayments. But now, by combining Nostr with Bitcoin, I use micropayments every single day. I'm always sapping people. I'm always interacting with them. And so I think Nostr is um, one of those applications or protocols of one of those applications of Bitcoin, which will also orange pill a lot of people. So I know a lot of Nostriches which never used Bitcoin before, but because they had this opportunity to zap or receive Bitcoin, then they looked into Bitcoin, what it is. So yeah, that's kind of like what I really like about it now. But obviously, the potential of Nostr is even bigger. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. I think we are like 2012 of Bitcoin is where we are right now with Nostr. There's still so many challenges which we have to overcome. There are so many opportunities, but it's pretty cool to see those being solved every day and being solved in front of your eyes and kind of being part of it. And yeah, that's my first comment on Nostr.
I think it's great what we see with Nostra, and I think it's a small window that we will see everywhere, where Bitcoin is so deeply integrated in something that people don't even notice that they use Bitcoin, because all of a sudden they're just having a wallet on Primal and they're just zapping people, and they don't necessarily have to know about Bitcoin. They don't necessarily have to know what's going on with the Lightning protocol and doing it with Bitcoin and channels and all those things. They're like, oh, like I just zap 50 satoshis there. Like, okay, what is a satoshi? I don't care. It's a value. So I think most people probably will be never orange pilled, even though they will use Bitcoin every day.
Yeah.
So that's probably how it will end up being in the long run, the same way as everyone uses the TCP/IP protocol every day. But how many people can really explain it in detail? Like, I don't know, like maybe 0.5% of the world,
Yeah.
anything like that.
Exactly. And I mean, I think Peter Thiel said that like technologies inherently are supposed to make your life easier and not harder. And I think for a lot of people, we're still in the stage where Bitcoin, if they would need it, it's still making their life a little bit harder than it actually should be. But we're getting very, very gradually and slowly to that point where this is actually not the case anymore, where you don't even, like you said, on Nostr, you don't need to care about it anymore. You don't need to set up any wallet. You don't need to even like open Lightning channels or something like that. It just works. And as soon as we are at that point where the technology makes your life actually easier than harder, I think then we're ready for like all the mass adoption of one Bitcoin, but also of Nostr. And that's why I think it's so cool to see how we're getting there, because I still remember when I joined Nostr, I needed to figure out how to upload a picture to a web server and then link this web server to the protocol. And only by doing that, I had a profile picture. And that's something like, I'm pretty young. I didn't experience early internet. For me, it kind of worked. Of course, the UX improved massively, but being onto something which actually breaks now, like that not often. There are still periods where Nostr doesn't work properly because there's something happening. It's kind of cool to see, because when was the last time that you, I don't know, saw some big trend happening in front of your eyes and actually have the opportunity to be part of it? And therefore, yeah, I think Nostr is very fascinating.
Yeah, it's like many revolutions going on in front of our eyes with Bitcoin and Nostra. And I agree. The first internet website that I can remember was already Google. So it's like that was the first one that I opened. So I jumped a lot of previous attempts at the internet and computing technology in general. And it's so cool to talk with people that are like born in 1960, 1970 or something like that, where I'm like, okay, how was the internet adoption? And then comparing that to Bitcoin and seeing the parallels even of that, it's really fun to do those things. Yeah, really cool. What are before we come to the end routines? What are some of your future product projects that you are excited about?
So I started working on the second Nostr documentary. That's like still in like filming phase right now. I have still a lot of open questions on, like, until I'm actively be able to start editing and do the proper work. But that's something which I started. Then my main focus is on 21C, helping other brands as well to create like good Bitcoin content. That's kind of like my main focus right now, as well as Proof of Health, which is the podcast where I actually, what I said as well, I just chose the angle of Bitcoin which I'm most interested about, which is more currently health. and I'm just trying to learn as much as possible by having experts on there, because I'm not a health expert. I'm just trying things myself, experimenting. But I didn't learn this. I'm not a medical doctor. I'm not a physician, but there are so many different things that I want to learn about it. So that's kind of like my personal journey of what I'm gonna be focused on, because that's what gets me up at night, and I'm excited about.
Really cool. Will be fun to see that. I've asked one question to each and every one of my guests, and the question is, what can we learn from you besides Bitcoin?
Oh, besides Bitcoin, but Bitcoin touches everything, sir. um, I think besides Bitcoin is that I had a talk in El Salvador and in Japan during the last 2 years, which I titled "Stop Consuming and Start Creating." And I think the one thing which people can learn from me besides Bitcoin is that it is extremely rewarding to start switching your life from consuming all of the content, consuming other people's thoughts, consuming other people's lives, to actually focus on your own life. And I think the way of doing that is by actually actively start creating. That doesn't mean you need to be a content creator or post about it, but just creating different things, be it like experiences which you want to create a family, build something, instead of just being this passive person who's living other people's life. And the way I would tell anybody to do that is kind of like, just trust in your own viewpoint of things. If it's Bitcoin, if it's whatever topic you're interested in, and then gradually just start writing your thoughts down and putting things out in the universe. And it's going to be highly rewarding. You never know who's going to see it. You never know what's going to happen from it. But stop consuming and start creating.
Yeah, there's this. The, there's this. I want to add one small caveat to that, because I really love that message, and I talked about that a lot, not on the podcast actually. It's a topic that I've not discussed too much on the podcast, but like the difference between consuming and actively learning, like passively consuming, just like whatever, and just like letting yourself go with the algorithms and the Netflixes and anything like that. And just like actively like seeking out content and actively learning, and then creating something with that, or having some kind of things with that, instead of like just passively consuming and sleeping.
Exactly.
And like actively learning something, actively educating yourself something, and then creating with that. I think that's a really cool concept. Thank you so much for bringing that on the podcast.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. Like even like if you consume with the intention to create something yourself, like that's the right thing to do. But just as you said, like living as the algorithmic slave and just consuming anything which has no connection to who you are, what you're trying to achieve, is ultimately time wasted. And I don't think that like you there you don't need to get rid of it 100%, but just try to focus more on the creation side or the active consuming side, rather than just be in the passive consuming side, because I think most people default into this in our world today. So by making an active effort to get out of this, I think you will increase your life quality drastically.
Yeah, there's also like this. You need to figure out like how to make a break. So sometimes it's cool to just like lay back and not do anything. But maybe it's better to take a walk instead of watching Netflix or TikToks.
Actually.
Really cool. We have an end routine in the podcast where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asks you the question, what is your highest purpose in life? It's one of the rare non-Bitcoin questions.
But it's a good one. What is my highest purpose of life? If I would boil it down in one sentence, is becoming the best version of myself possible. And that then includes all of the other aspects of life, building healthy relationships, healthy businesses, healthy sleeping routines, all of that. Yeah, I think that's probably it.
I love that. Thank you so much, Max, for being on. Before I let you go, where can people find you, ask you questions, and reach out to you?
Yeah, I'm Max DeMarco. You can find me on Nostr. You can find me on Twitter, on YouTube. And yeah, if you have a podcast or a Bitcoin business and need more Bitcoin content, feel free to reach out to 21C Studios. You can find my email there as well. And yeah, other than that, on my podcast, Proof of Health, if you're interested in Bitcoin and living a healthy life, make sure to listen to the episodes there. But other than that, hopefully gonna see you guys in real life somewhere.
I think the fastest and biggest place where we probably see each other, the people that are here and maybe you also. Are you in Prague? Bitcoin
I'm
Prague?
planning to go there. Yeah.
Really cool. Yeah, I think it's one of my favorite conferences, especially also in Europe. So yeah, will be fun to go there. And yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye bye.